So I don't see Martin yet, and we should wait for Paul to get back. Oh, there he is right now.
I'm back.
Should we go ahead and get started? Thanks,
Paul.
Okay, so this is an interim meeting of the AI Preferences Working Group. It is being recorded, and that is per the IETF policy regarding recording meetings. Likewise, you see on the screen the other policies that we have that are applicable regarding things like conduct, anti-harassment, intellectual property, and the general standards process. So if you're not familiar with this, please do take the time to use your favorite internet search engine to find IETF Note Well. It will tell you about all of these applicable policies, and these are the policies that we do run our meetings under. And if you have any questions, you can talk to us, Suresh and myself as work group chairs. You can talk to people who are IETF area directors or otherwise people in the IASG or any other leadership folks if you have any questions or need any clarifications. So this is our agenda for the meeting. Excuse me. This meeting is fairly straightforward. We just wanted to spend a little bit of time going through the issues list and talking about each of them, trying to figure out what its disposition is, whether we can get someone to commit to making proposals or refining proposals or otherwise progressing the status of the issues in the time between now and our April interim meeting that we have scheduled in Toronto. And so to make that meeting more productive, I don't think we'll close any issues today unless we find some that are clearly overcome by events or otherwise ready to close. And of course, before we do anything, we always take things to the list. So it's very much a working meeting. I mentioned the Toronto interim. I just checked the registration for that. The room is almost at its normal capacity. I think Suresh, you said that if we need to, we can set up some chairs along the side of the room. So I don't think that we're going to be in the case where we're going to have to refuse any registrations, but you may be asked to go to the side of the room. So if you haven't registered for that meeting yet, please do so. The details are on the website, which I can show you real quick. On this website, IETF Working Group, AIPREF.github.io, meeting materials, and it is this meeting right here. And there's a link to the arrangements, which has the registration details in it. And there we are, there's the registration form. And we'll put that on the mailing list to remind people. I think we put a reminder out last week. We'll put out one more reminder pretty soon.
Yeah, and if you're not able, if you register and not able to make it, keep us updated as well. Like it could mean somebody else like being able to get in. And
exactly.
yeah, as like Mark said, we're not going to refuse anybody because I think the room can fit us in. It's just that like we want to keep the more active participants in like in a U-shaped table format, so it's easier for discussions. But even the side thing is really not like that bad. Like it's a pretty big room that we got.
Yeah.
So.
And also, as a reminder, remote participation is also available for that meeting. So if you can't make it in person to Toronto, you can, just like this meeting, use MeetEcho to dial in. Any other administrivia? We've gone through the agenda. We've done the note well. Can we have someone take notes for this meeting using this? Oh, we don't have a notes link on here, do we? Using your favorite note-taking mechanism.
It's in the top of the MeetEcho, Mark. So if you look at the top of the thing, if you see the AIPREF working group, there's like a notepad and a pencil thing, so you can click on it and take notes if you want.
Oh, here it is. I'm sorry, I'm completely ignoring meeting notepad right here. Yeah. Can we have a volunteer to take notes?
Or many, like, if you can take notes for whatever part of it you can, I think it's still helpful.
Don't be shy.
Hi, this is Eric Stallman. I would be happy to take notes. I can't seem to find a way to edit the document, and I've also have to leave at 10 minutes before the hour. But with if someone can give me a hand here, I'm happy to help out.
Thank you. I think it's just a collaborative. I see a few people saying they can assist. Timid Robot, thank you. Martin, thank you. So if folks can just collaborate on that. To edit the document, you need to log in using Data Tracker. So the same login that you used for getting into this meeting should work to actually help edit that document. And Martin just pasted the link in the chat. So we'll just if we'll also keep, I think, the state of discussion or at least some notes in the issues. So hopefully between that and the notes that people keep, we'll have a good record of what happens in the meeting. And of course, it's recorded as well. So I think we're covered.
Thanks.
Okay, so thanks to all those folks who have asked or put their hands up to do that. So let's go ahead and dig into the issues. Eric, sorry, could you? Oh, thank you. Right, let's go ahead and go to the issues. I have used labels to bucket up the issues into categories just for the purpose of helping to guide the discussion. They're not hard limits on the topics, and I don't want to spend too much time contesting the labels. It's just a way to organize our discussion. So first we have what hopefully are the somewhat easier issues about terminology, and we have a few of those. So let's just start at the top here. Issue 179, excuse me, the use of fine-tune in foundation AI model production category. So Krishna had the observation that fine-tune is unnecessary and scientifically imprecise. It has an overly broad meaning dependent on the context and is very hard to define. And did we have any discussion? We haven't had any discussion of this yet. So I think maybe just a quick time box discussion. Do folks agree that this is an issue? Any other observations about it? And then we can figure out if we can find someone to own progressing it. Martin, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm going to level the standard objection to the term overly broad. I think that gets overused in this context because we don't have an agreement of what broad enough or precisely broad enough would be. I think there's once again a tendency to use overly emotive language here, but I do think that there is a valid concern here, but it's more than just terminology. This is not a topic that sort of fits neatly into the, well, we just need to get the terms right. I think this is concretely a discussion about the scope of the definition that we're including here for AI training. And I think there's a lot of context here that we'll have to get into, probably best for the room in April.
Okay, so it sounds like this perhaps would be best just left for the time being, and like you say, address it as part of the definition of AI training overall. Okay, any other comment? Timid Robot.
I'm just wondering, in the past, I'm sorry, I don't remember, my memory's not very good. We've had a lot of participation from folks at AI companies. And so I was just wondering if there were suggestions. I think that kind of the meaning of fine-tuning can specialize a general purpose foundation model for a narrow set of use cases is more or less clear of what we're trying to get at. But if we're moving on, maybe just an ask that people could suggest terms or phrases in the GitHub issue.
Chris Needham.
Yeah, thank you. So from my point of view, I think that we need to we need to cover all aspects in the definition. We need to cover all aspects of what we've currently called foundation model production. And so I think fine tuning for me sort of sits within sort of that definition, and I'm not entirely sure that it's helpful to try to sort of tease apart the various different aspects of what it means to produce a model. That can include training aspects, it can include what's being described here as fine tuning. So I think to the extent that fine tuning is part and parcel of the creation of foundation models, I think it should be included, and I think it's helpful to keep that as part of the definition.
Thanks, Chris. Alyssa?
Alyssa?
I think maybe something to think about to help here is, when does a model stop being produced? That's like the boundary condition for this category. And so to go down the path of like debating the fine tuning term is like, what is part of production? But you could also say like, when does production end? And if you could define that condition, then you maybe don't have to define every single thing that counts in the production category. But you know when you're not doing model production anymore and you're doing something else.
Thanks. Pedro.
So just to add from a technical point of view, I think there's something that can be done in this regard, because the problem is that there are many things that people like, from a technical, let's say, research point of view, fine tuning can mean several things. But if we are worrying about the part that is just about production, I think it's easier to talk about are the weights of the model changing? So it's the model itself changing, or is the model remaining stable, like static, like the weights are not changing? So I think that's a better, like, there's no single technical term that I can come up with, but I think thinking in terms of are the weights changing, it's a bit more specific.
So Pedro, to your point, like, would that be the boundary condition that Alyssa was talking about? Like, that is that where you would draw the line?
I think that's better, and I think that is also easier to draw the line when I think discussion, and I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but like the discussion about like what is inference will come. I think thinking about the weights of the model, if they are changing, that's easier.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. It sounds like we've exhausted the queue there, and perhaps we'll move on and just keep this in our pocket and continue the discussion. So next up, let's go to 163 from Joe, replacing digital assets with digital content. Joe was asking that we use something other than digital asset throughout, because she sees a conflict with how the IRS uses it regarding cryptocurrency. And I see that there was some pushback on that in the thread here from a couple of folks. I think, again, time box discussion. Do people agree with Joe? Do people want to push back on this change? This is terminology, so I don't want to, bike shed too much. But if we can get a few more reactions, and then we can maybe take it to the list to resolve it. Martin, go ahead.
Yeah, so this one I do think fits strictly within the terminology definition. I tend to agree with Joe. I think the word asset means that someone owns something. And so if we were strictly talking about things like copyright, then it would make sense to continue to use something like asset. But I think that in this context, it's probably a misleading term based on people's sort of colloquial understanding of the word asset. And I know that a lot of people have sunk a lot of time and effort into debating what it is that we call these things, but I also just disagree with the outcome. Now, I realize that Paul's probably going to jump on. on the queue and disagree with me, and that's fine. But I think we can spend a bit of time on this, but I'm not sure that it's really constructive for us to spend too much meeting time on the subject.
Lala.
Hi, yeah, I just want to basically say exactly the same thing that Martin just said. I find the word asset to almost like too specific and referring to like a particular thing with a certain value that can be associated with it. Anyway, that's how maybe we Americans think about it. And it just seems like it would be more confusing. Content feels like a much more all-purpose term, and it feels like it fits what we're actually trying to talk about here. So I'm just going to kind of echo Martin and Joe.
Faris.
Yeah, so, well, Leila, I didn't see Leila's hand was up. So she said, but we've been objecting to using the term asset instead of content for a long time. And another reason that that I personally think that this can lead to asset level signaling, and Leonard disagrees with me. I raised it on mailing list as well. This will lead to asset level signaling, and so at the IETF, I don't think that the IETF should enforce copyright, and I think asset level signaling could lead to that. I might be wrong, rarely, but that's where it's coming from. So these are like the different angles.
So far as you agree with changing away from asset?
Yeah, if we can, but you know.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we'll take this to the list. I think, like Martin said, we don't want to spend a lot of group time on this, and terminology issues. I think because this is so loaded, we do want to make sure there's some consensus here. So we'll just take that to the list. Next up, 162. I think this one is largely editorial. Joe suggested we move away from language like respect and ignore, which as she says, attributes a human intentions and emotions into the vocabulary. So we signed this editorial. The editors, whenever we mark something editorial, the notion is the editors can address the issue without taking it to the entire list. Really quickly, if anybody has any concerns about that, now's the time to raise that. Otherwise, you know, of course, there's always the opportunity to push back in the next draft. No comments. I don't see any hands up. Okay. Next up, 152, use of machine learning. So Ecker raised this a while back. Not sure about the use of the phrase machine learning in the definition of AI training. And so he is recommending we just remove that to have something like a definition that would say something like the use of data to produce or improve an artificial intelligence system, striking the term machine learning entirely. And no real discussion of this yet. Any thoughts from folks? Timid Robot.
My name is Timid Robot. I've heard machine learning used like specifically, meaningfully, in a way that I think AI often doesn't mean any specific thing. And so I would like more, I guess, reasoning behind removing machine learning. That I'm worried that AI is too general or meaningless. Thank you.
Nate?
Hi, I'm Nate Hake. I also agree. artificial intelligence is marketing term. Like it doesn't mean anything. It's these things aren't intelligent. They don't have a world model. They can't experience the world. So without the term machine learning, to me, it becomes too amorphous.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Doesn't look like it.
Doesn't look like it. Okay, we'll continue the discussion, I think, on a list in the meetings. That's good feedback, though. It helps us understand what people are thinking. Finally, and again, tied into what we've talked about before, we have definition of AI. Again, feedback from Ecker. And this is again about the breadth of the term. The definition of AI is extremely problematic. It would effectively sweep in any statistical technique. I understand that sufficient complexity is intended to somehow reduce the scope, but it's a totally subjective standard. And so, yeah, perhaps this isn't a terminology issue. This is, as we kind of got to before, a definition issue of how do we define what we're talking about here, and should this group attempt to define AI. We've gone around this in a few different ways, looking at external references, looking at text that we think is good for our purpose, and we still have uneasiness about it. How can we concretely move this forward? And I'm looking now at the discussion on the issue. Not a lot. Any additional thoughts at this point? Martin.
So it would be very easy to ascribe motives to certain people and say that the focus on definitions is an attempt to get us to argue about the number of angels dancing on the head of pins or something along those lines. But there's probably something to this. We've tried a bunch of approaches on these definition things, and the terms that we have here are based on definitions in law in various places, and as well as various other standards organizations. There's no simple formula for this. And so what we have here is sort of a combination of definitions from a bunch of different sources, adapted, I think, as much as possible to the setting in which we find it. But it may just be that we can't ever come to a common understanding of what it means, because there is no clear boundaries around what this thing is. To Ecker's point, statistical techniques is essentially what the large scale models do as well, when you get right down to it. So it may not be a constructive use of our time. And so one approach we could potentially consider here is to say, we're not going to bother defining these terms, and we can explicitly say that, and we can rely on people's own understanding of the terms. It doesn't feel very satisfactory, but it's an option.
Eric.
Yeah, I think I just want to echo that and say that I spent a little bit of time after looking at this trying to find other definitions in the wild that were preferable to the one that was here, and really struggled to find anything. And I note that the issue does not come with a proposed resolution. It just sort of notes the problem. So the two things, I think, until someone comes up with a more serviceable definition of the term, I think you have to go with what you have. And if the issue that it's too broad, that it's sweeping in things that are not intended to be swept in, it seems what would be helpful is for people to identify some of those uses that they don't think should be within the term, and sort of just reasoning by the trying to exclude those use cases. Maybe we can refine the definition, but until then, I think you have to sort of, again, this conversation could take the rest of time. So I think we have to go with what you have.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, I broadly agree. I think we should have a definition. I don't think we should go down the road of like not having a definition and leaving it up to interpretation. And I think, we've made a pretty reasonable attempt at, using existing definitions to sort of create, to create our own. And that sort of seems reasonable to me. I think the words that we have are, not far off what, a reasonable definition. So I think, what we have seems okay to me. But I'd worry about it in the draft at all.
Thanks, Chris. Meredith.
Hey, I just had to follow up on a sort of bigger structural point that Eric Stallman made incidentally, which is I think having some use cases might be really helpful to move forward on some of these definition questions, because I think you have to start from like the use cases and then evaluate the definitions meaning and function against them and not the other way around. Like the point of this is to actually regulate real world or to influence real world decisions about scenarios that come up, not to just write great definitions and find out how they operate. And so I just wanted to really second that here and elsewhere, I think scenarios help, and I am happy to help write them. I'm more on the like user side than the technical side. So I'm happy to maybe partner with somebody who is more technical, and I can think about some of the like lay use case side and work with a more technical person.
I think we've talked about capturing use cases before, and we haven't made much progress. Maybe we could just start a wiki page on the GitHub and have folks contribute there. I have some ideas I could start there, and Meredith, if you wanted to chip in, and other folks, maybe we can at least get something to help seed discussion.
Yeah, I think that would be important for just moving some of the discussion forward of like, do we want this discussion to rule this use in or out? Otherwise, it can be a bit circular. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
Chris?
Yeah, the need, so I agree with the need for use cases. This is something that I've mentioned in some of our past meetings. I think having a collection of use cases that we can review definitions against would be very helpful. So I don't know that I can commit a huge amount of time to helping, but I'm certainly willing to help out.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Elaine?
Thanks. Just to clarify, has the decision by the group already been made that the group collectively does not like the definitions from OECD or NIST or ISO, or is that still TBD?
So there is like quite a few definitions that were thrown up, Elaine. Like nothing seems satisfactory, but if you want to propose something that already exists, just like put that in there as well. Like we can certainly take a look at them and see whether or not they fit. Because I think the one thing that kind of came up multiple times was like the ITU definitions of this, but it was like really not fit to purpose. Like I think Martin discussed it in a meeting in an actual IETF meeting. I don't know, Martin, I don't remember exactly where, but it certainly has been brought up that we could use somebody else's definition. So if there's something that fits, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I just don't want to re-raise something that's already been decided. I don't want to waste the group's time.
No, like there's nothing like we didn't find anything fit for purpose. So if you find something that would work, sure. Like I think Martin would be happy if somebody else wrote the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. If someone would hand it to me on a silver platter, I'd be delighted. But the fact of the matter is that this is based on at least it's pretty close to the OECD definition. There's a couple of things in the OECD definition that are a bit weird, and so I looked at there's an academic paper that talks about the definitions of various that are used in various legislation, including the OECD text and some of the text that the EU uses and the US laws. And I found that analysis pretty persuasive in sort of trying to eliminate some of the clauses that OECD had that didn't make any sense to me. And I did go through that analysis at the IETF meeting, and it's captured in one of the issues that talks about this one. So anyone who's looking to do a bit of work in this area should probably take a little bit of a look at that. And I'm happy to sort of point people at the various things that I've done. And the other thing was that you mentioned ITU. I think Arnaud shared the draft, and there were like 7 definitions of various things around AI, but no definition of AI in that document that he shared, or there were 7 or something. It was really confused. And so I didn't find that there was anything useful in that document at all, unfortunately.
Martin, if you could, when you get a chance, could you link the relevant paper and discussions into this issue, just so folks can find it?
Yeah, I'll
Thank you.
See if I can find it.
Thanks.
Thanks. Just a second, Eric, before you go. Alyssa, like when you talked about this definition, did you mean the OECD definition?
No, I meant the one in the issue, the one in the document.
Okay. Okay. Good.
I'm
Okay.
just, yeah, I'm unsure that Ecker will continue to engage on this particular thread, so we might be debating something that most other people feel okay about. I didn't really hear any support for the concern that was raised. I just heard people ideating about how to get around the concern, but that's why I asked.
Okay, thank you.
So we should ask that explicitly. Does anybody share the concern that Ecker has here? And either now put your hand up or put a comment on the issue. Eric, and then I think we'll probably move on from this issue.
Yeah, and I'll be very quick on this. I just wanted to say that so I'm familiar with the OECD definition and the NIST definition for AI system. There's a separate NIST definition for artificial intelligence. I'm embarrassingly not familiar with it. And happy to put those in whatever document they go in. But my sense was that these were kind of, the OECD definition at least was sort of considered as part of the process of coming up with the definition that is currently reflected in the draft, and want to know if that was correct or not.
I think we heard Martin say that it was.
Yeah, definitely. That was one of the main sources, and it is a pretty good definition. It just has a couple of things that are pretty wacky about it. I mean, if you read the OECD definition, you could be forgiven for thinking that it applies to software generally, not just AI. And I think that was one of the sort of failings that I've seen in a lot of the definitions, is that they take extraordinarily broad definitions, which was unsuited to our use. So that I just found the issue and I'll paste it in.
Great, thanks, Martin. Okay, let's go ahead and move on then. Okay, and that was all of the terminology labeled issues. Let's go on to the training issues. So we have 3. Alyssa, you raised this issue. How large is large and how large is a very large number of assets in the definition of foundation model production? And Martin, you gave a response talking about some context there. We need a proposal for this issue. So let's again have a time-bounded discussion. Any thoughts? Pedro.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't know if that's helping, but I think like after reading a little bit about where foundation model comes from, I mean, this starts as a, let's call it TermCon by Stanford. In this, I shared the link in this blog post when they opened the Center for Research on Foundation Models. And I see one immediate problem with, I mean, that's complicating the thing even, but like I see one immediate problem, and is that in the definition, they already give examples, and one example is a BERT model, which is a problem because that's one of the models that is used today for classical search. So I can see an immediate problem with, like, even beyond, like, if it's too large or if it's too small. I mean, the problem is that using it already blurs immensely the line between what a foundation model is or what generative AI is and then what classical search is. And I can also give you an example of how is this used by a commercial search engine like Google already. So
yeah, so one of the things I discovered in a lot of the definitions, and this again goes back to NIST and OECD and the various legislation in this area, they all seem to share a common stem in terms of the definition, but they have diverged in different ways. And so if you look at some of them, there's specific numbers involved. They will say a model with 1 billion weights or something like that, and they'll have a concrete number or more, and there's a threshold. And others will be 100,000 weights or more. And there's such a large amount of diversity here that I think that to really pin it down would be dangerous for us to do, given the current state of things and how fast things are changing. And to sort of Pedro's point, I think the way that we distinguish sort of foundation models from, for instance, the use in search is via other means. And I think the general recognition is that there are what are essentially foundation models or foundational models in the use of search, and we have to sort of recognize that and accept that, and not use size of the model as the sort of primary differentiating factor.
And Martin, to your point, right, the EU AI Act doesn't actually talk about a number too, right? It says like broad data at scale or something like that, right? Like very fuzzy.
The American ones do. And so it's, again, it's really unclear what the current state of art is. But there is sort of a general understanding that this idea of a foundational model is key, and it is something. It's a term that's used across a bunch of different contexts. So us using it is a good thing. Us attempting to define it is, again, like all these other things, a little bit hazardous. But I guess that the reminder here is that perfect is absolutely the enemy of making progress here. So we may have to be willing to accept something less than perfect.
Thank you. Pedro.
I think maybe to add to that, defining a particular size, or for instance, talking in terms of parameters, I think that's extremely dangerous for what we are trying to do here. Mostly because when you look at current research, what everybody's trying to do is to retain the same amount of, like, the same capabilities that large models have today, but reduce the number of parameters as much as possible. So the idea is to have smaller models that are as capable as the larger models. And you can see that happening already, like just this week. I think the DeepSeek team in China published models where the main feature was they are way smaller, but retain the same capabilities as larger models previously published. So if we set a threshold, that threshold might become very quickly irrelevant.
Thank you. Chris.
Yeah, I wanted to agree with Martin and with Pedro. I think trying to quantify this is likely to be counterproductive. What we need is a vocabulary that is usable by creators and publishers, and they're not necessarily going to know and understand the intricacies of how models are developed in order to be able to know the implications of any preference that they might be set. And having a threshold implies that there is some kind of model that is included in the preferences that publishers can express, and there's some kind of model that perhaps is outside of that scope. So what I would hope is that the work that we've talked about earlier around use cases could perhaps attempt to surface those kind of distinctions, like if they exist, and take a sort of, rather than a try to quantify approach, take a more of a use case driven approach.
All right, Alyssa.
Maybe the title of this issue was a misnomer. I definitely was not suggesting that the thing be quantified, but more that the terms large and very large are ambiguous. And it's sort of precisely for some of the reasons that Pedro mentioned, which is that like, at what point does one qualify? How much data is very large data? You know, how large of a model is a large model? So I actually would say taking those words out would make this clearer potentially. And I'm sure that in some annals of time of this group, it was discussed why these size indicators are needed in the first place instead of just focusing on what the models do. But it does seem like the operative part of this definition is that can be applied to a wide range of use cases. Like that's the thing that distinguishes these models from other models, as opposed to the size of the data set that they're trained on, or the number of parameters that they have. So I would say, could we take all the quantification words out?
Okay. Reactions to that? That's very helpful, Alyssa. Thank you. So I think that suggestion is removing large here. And
yeah, I just think the chat, everyone is saying yes, yes, +1, remove, remove. I'm not seeing any pushback. So in case you're not monitoring the chat, like everybody's +1ing. So
thank you, because I can't look at that many things on my screen. So thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
So Mark, tentatively just remove this thing in the next revision and then see if anybody else has.
Right. I think the editors can take this forward and adjust and bring back any questions to the group. So that seems very helpful. Okay, let's move on then. Okay, we did the quantified. Oh, wait. Oh, that's we already talked about that one. And this one, AI training and generative AI training are too broad. This was again from Ecker. AI training is a coherent category, but seems like a trap for the unwary because lots of people are going to turn it on and thus exclude all kinds of useful applications. And what they really want is much more narrow, something like Gen AI. I also have a problem with the term training for the reasons indicated above. Generative AI training is a remarkably wide category, so forth and so on. So we have a couple of different issues along these lines in that, you know, more on the search side, I suppose. But first of all, do people share the concern that Ecker has here? And can we make any progress on discussing it? MT, go ahead.
So I think this has been overtaken by events. We have foundation model training now, and we don't have either of the two categories that Ecker's talking about. So it may just be that we need to close this issue and move on.
Okay.
Also, too broad is weird, but I think he's right. It was potentially the case that this was dragging in a whole bunch of things that are problematic or that would be not intended by folks who chose to use those terms, but they don't exist anymore.
Right. I'm paging this back in, and I remember I asked Ecker whether it was still an issue because of that, and this was his response, that we still have a definition for AI training.
Doesn't matter.
I don't know that we should remove that.
No.
Any thoughts? Okay.
Now, back to the points that we were talking about previously, we still need to work on the definition of AI training, but I think because it is a fundamental part of foundation model training and the category that we're defining, we do kind of have to have those things.
Right. I'm assuming you'll go and editorially look and make sure that there's the appropriate linkage between foundation model training and AI training and adjust as necessary.
Stuff.
Okay. Any other comments, or should we move on? Okay.
Now default.
I think that's
Next
all
one
three
is
of
defaults. Our favorite thing, defaults.
Sorry?
I think our next one is our favorite issue, defaults.
So that's not in this category.
No, this category is done.
Yeah. So then we go to the search issues. And we have these. I'm not quite sure what to do with this issue, to be honest. This is 187. Search category may lead to unintended effects. Does not reflect how modern search engines operate today, let alone how they operate in the near future. This, I think, could be considered in the same time as we keep on coming back to the purpose-based and refining the definition of search. So I think this is a concern that people are aware of, but because there's not a proposal, I'm not sure it's useful to just look at this specific issue. And does anybody have any comments, Caleb?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to try and flesh it out with a proposed resolution or anything if there's interest. It was just calling out, I mean, sort of what it says there, that there seems to be a distinction being made here between a false dichotomy maybe between old-fashioned search listings and completely new synthetic generative AI question answering without an appreciation for the middle ground. And so I'll try and flesh that out with some more examples or maybe a proposal of how this affects the search definition.
That'd be fantastic. Yeah.
Comments here because that will help me. So if anyone else has
and again, that's the purpose of this meeting is to have some preliminary discussion so people can go away, do some work, make some proposals, talk to people, and then we can have a productive discussion in April. Any other thoughts that folks have about this general topic that might help, Caleb?
Yeah, I think like to Caleb's point, right? Like the Krishna also had some issues that are kind of like similar in thing. If you go back, Mark, right? Like there's other issues that have a similar kind of bent in it, and maybe if you can work with them, I think it'll be good to kind of get the Bing perspective as well from the search. I think that'll really help out, like close a whole bunch of these issues at one shot.
Okay, Eric.
Yeah. Sorry, and maybe it's something that just needs to be sort of developed through later discussion. But I did have that sort of confusion of there's both the definition of search application and then in section 4.2 there's this sort of the idea that if you declare to allow search, with both of these conditions, a preference to allow search usage enables the presentation of links and titles in what is considered traditional search results. So I was confused as whether this category is subsuming all of search or if there's some special subspecies of search that is the search that is done through artificial intelligence, and then how to distinguish between the two. So yeah, maybe this is one that's best developed through later conversation, but I've been confused about this for a while. Yeah.
Fair enough, thanks. Pedro.
Just to add something there, I think there's I mean, I wouldn't like to see an outcome of this specific discussion or definition where we have, let's say, traditional search in us. It doesn't use artificial intelligence because that's, I think, I mean, this has been brought up multiple times. So it's like nowadays, what you see as traditional search uses very similar models or even the same models that the generative stuff is using. The only difference being that one is indexing, so it's just generating some, let's call it internal representations of the data that are used for indexing. And the other one, the more modern approach, is using those internal representations, not to give you an index, but to give you text that is generated. So, but the let's say the underlying technology, it's indistinguishable. So I think that's something that has to be, yeah, put somewhere in that discussion.
Okay, so let's leave that there, I think. And if folks could continue the discussion on the list, in the issue, one-on-one if you need to, and bring proposals and nuances to the list. I think that's a good representation of where we're at. People do recognize that the underlying technology is less important part here. It's more the presentation and how it's used. Okay. Second, and I think we might be able to get through some of these quite quickly because there's some similarities. This is Krishna's issue that was mentioned. And so this is about the verbatim match language that's currently in the draft. I believe it's still there with the exact text match. Any thoughts about this one? I don't think there's been any discussion of this at all. Alyssa.
I think it would be great to actually consider the more specific categories that are in Krishna's draft as potential substitutes for what is in the search definition. I don't know if that's already like happening in the background. This is not the first time this has been discussed. I apologize for not putting it in the issue, but I'm curious, like, when is the time that we get to like look at that draft and think like, do these categories get us further than what we have in the current working group draft?
We did that work, Alyssa, and those things were in the draft for a period, and then we discussed them. I'm not going to say the last IETF meeting, but maybe the one before. So Montreal, I think, was where we discussed the definitions that Krishna proposed, and I think I'm probably paraphrasing a little bit too much here, but I don't think it was possible to make sense of them.
It's too bad.
Yeah. But concretely,
I think they make more sense than what's in the working group draft.
Really?
It does.
Okay.
Yes.
We have very different mental models of things then, and it's probably worth continuing the discussion there. But my view of the text that's in the current draft is that it's much more aligned with what I understand the intent of Microsoft proposals to be as they relate to sort of display-based, because this is about the outcome rather than the internal processes. But I mean, go ahead. Specific critique and alternatives would be helpful.
Maybe we are getting our wires crossed. That's what I'm talking about. The discrete display-based categories in Krishna's draft. That's what I think would be clearer than like binding a couple of display-based ish factors together in the definition of search. Sorry, I thought this was still like a TBD conversation, but if it already happened, I just missed it. So
no, I don't think we've really sealed that, but I think when it came time to discuss this, no one was able to translate what was in Microsoft's draft into something that everyone could sort of agree was something that made sense. That's all. So there's a lengthy discussion about this, and I don't think it turned up anything that was actionable.
Okay.
Now,
I'll have to go find that.
There is still an open question about whether to break what we have here down into discrete steps and have individual items for that. And that's what's currently there is a single unitary thing that has multiple properties that could maybe be separated out into different things. But again, I think this is one of those cases where a concrete proposal would be helpful.
I think one of the complicating factors. Sorry, one of the complicating factors here is that we have a framework that is not only about robots.txt and what's on websites, but it's also about attaching things to content, and it's about very different kinds of content. And applying that vocabulary that Krishna came up with across those different mechanisms made a lot of people nervous. I think that was part of it. Meredith.
So one question that comes up to me when we're talking about the difference between, if there is any difference, which there may not be, between search and model building is, would it be considered neutral or negative if when we pick a definition, it makes people change their technology structure to engineer around that definition. So like if we end up with a definition of search that is separate from model building, and so people then bifurcate their products so they have a search product that can meet that and have to separate it artificially from an AI product they wouldn't do for technology reasons, but they do for policy reasons. Is that neutral? And we go, okay, good. We made a definition, people meet it or they don't. Or is that negative because we say we've created this inefficiency where people have had to bifurcate in order to comply with policy? I just think that's one way to think about this. Another way to answer it right now, but it's a question I think going forward as we make those hypotheticals and as we think about the work in Toronto.
Thank you. Fars.
Yeah, I'm just too late. Everybody says whatever I want to say. But so I just wanted to say that I clearly remember Montreal meeting, and Krishna's proposal and draft was not thoroughly discussed. And I think it merits a discussion because we have also like when we're like talking about like the looking at his internet draft and adopting it and stuff like that, like we didn't really discuss the different elements and say, okay, so no, we are not going to take this on because of this and that reason. So I think that it would be great to during Toronto meeting we can like discuss Krishna or on the meetings.
Okay, Pedro.
So maybe, and I mean, I don't work for one of the, let's say, search providers, but one thing that I can comment on that bifurcation is that normally maintaining two different technologies, especially if one of the technologies is very outdated, because that would be the way of implementing something that is not based on models today. I mean, I don't see providers implementing another technology just for that kind of policy. I would see more of, okay, if you don't agree with the new technology, then we don't index you kind of solution.
Okay. Thank you, Paul, and I think we're gonna move on after Paul.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we didn't discuss these in full detail, right? Like we got distracted into other directions, and so I think it's valuable to discuss them. The 2 points I would want to make is we need to have clarity for what context we're discussing them, if it's in the vocabulary or in a specific attachment mechanism. It strikes me that some of the categories proposed in the draft are very attachment specific, mechanism specific, and might, as a result, be overly specific for more general vocabulary. The other point, I think it will be very useful to have use cases and run them against these proposals. So that's going back to like really us drawing up a list of agreed upon use cases before the Toronto meeting where we can just like run these use cases against whatever proposals we have, because that will allow us to make judgments what works and what doesn't work, opposed to what we like or do not like.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Okay.
So Mark, like, so would a action item be like, kind of make sure that we have a set of use cases before Toronto and bring this item up again at that point and see how Krishna's thing can be included? Yeah.
Right. I'll seed that and send him out to the list.
Okay.
Search is too broad from Chris Needham. I think we've largely covered this in other discussion. Chris, did you have anything you wanted to add from your perspective?
No, I think this is similar to the previous. Like, I mean, the gist of this is that the way that the way that I read the definition that we have at the moment includes what AI systems output today. It generates text and it generates links. So I don't know that we've gone quite far enough to distinguish sort of a generative AI chatbot type response from a search engine response. But I think, given that we sort of discussed this kind of definition in the previous issue, I'm perhaps in if Caleb, for example, comes up with some alternate language that we can review, then perhaps come back to this issue in that context. But yeah, I don't think there's much to add from this point of view, over what we've just talked about.
Did you have any thoughts about the question that I put into the comments on the issue? If the results are indistinguishable between an AI search and a non-AI search engine, if it uses or does not use AI in its backend technology, do you feel that you still need control over that?
I don't know, possibly. I need to give that more thought.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't want to say one way or the other at the moment.
Don't want to put you on the spot. Just if you could think about that, and if you come to any insights there, it might help move the discussion forward.
Thank you. Yeah.
I feel like this is one of the key issues is, do people still want to try and control just the use of AI for its own sake, or is there some other aspect that they're trying to control?
Understood. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And finally, this is Krishna's issues, search to be removed. I think this is largely duplicative with his other issue here and elsewhere. I think he has one. So I think we've covered most of this as well. This is about Krishna's draft, effectively. And obviously, I think from what we've heard here, we need to spend some time on that in Toronto. So let's get to a place where we can. Next up, we have the use issues. And look at the time, we've got a half an hour left, so let's not spend too much time on any one issue. We have two of these. One is again from Chris, the missing category for RAG and grounding, and I think the other is similar. It's from Brad Silver, but it has an actual proposal. It had his draft. And so we have one proposal here that was quite some time ago, and there's been a lot of discussion since. We've had a couple of other proposals in this area that we've talked about and eventually rejected. So I'm not sure that there's a lot to talk about here, except to encourage folks to, if they have a proposal that they think might be able to gain consensus, to write it down and to bring it to the group, ideally before Toronto, if we want to talk about it there. I think that's the only way we can really make progress here. And that includes refinements to the previous proposals that have failed to gain consensus. If we can move those along, that would be really helpful. Nate.
Yeah. On that point, if anyone's wants to work on something like this is a very important issue from my end. I'm very new to kind of how this works, so I'm not necessarily sure about the mechanics of it. What happened to that proposal at Montreal where we were talking about the AI summaries? Is that what we're talking about here? That's been kind of sidelined or not? That's what this debate is?
Well, this general category is for any post-training kind of use of data by AI. And it might be specific to specific use cases, or it might be broad. We had a broad category in a couple of different forms for a while, but we failed to make progress on those.
My view is that, just to be clear, my view is that there has to be something other than training and search, because search is, and the purpose-based thing is interesting because the purpose of search is to find something. Now we are having these AI summary engines that are not meant to connect searchers with the web. They are meant as the destination. So there's got to be something there for grounding RAG for that summary. I won't take more of the time of this group, but this is something that I'm very keyed in on and happy to work with anyone on either side who wants to do this.
I think like Martin will talk to your thing, Nate, but we did kind of start off with trying to do this, right? And we couldn't find a really good way of doing it. I think, yeah, if you have a proposal, please bring it up.
Okay.
Martin?
Martin.
I wasn't going to address that point. I'm happy to, but I think the reason I got in queue was to remind people that it's not necessarily very helpful to drop a proposal the day before a meeting. There's just not enough time for people to digest the contents of it or even to read it because they'll be on planes or what have you. And so the request there is that if someone has a proposal, I think I'd like to see it ideally 2 weeks before the meeting, but a week would be,
At least.
the bare minimum for that sort of thing. And so if you have something, that's not a lot of time right now. You're basically talking about 4 weeks to get something together if you're intending to do that sort of thing.
I like the one that was at Montreal where we were talking about if it summarizes it. Like I'm quite surprised actually that this is the group seems to have moved past this. Quite surprised. So I will drop everything I have to work on this. The future of the web is at stake because you have monopolistic search engines telling the United Kingdom that they will only be willing to pay for RAG access when they cannot access something. And so if we combine search and AI summary together, that is a problem for everyone except for monopolists, because the other AI companies will not have the same ability to access the information. Creators won't have control over how their stuff appears. Like, this is the central question of this whole group, in my opinion. Anyway, I'll end there, but please reach out to me. I will make this happen.
That sounds good.
Just to interject quickly, I did a while back put onto the wiki kind of all the different use-related proposals into one place. And it strikes me that maybe one thing that would be helpful is if we could also summarize what the issues that we found were with each of the proposals so that we can capture that state. And if folks have, I'll take a stab at that if other folks want to help out to characterize that, that'd be appreciated. Chris.
Yeah, I have to agree with Nate. Like this is fundamental. Like in our view, or in my view, the vocabulary just isn't fit for purpose. Like without some kind of definition that covers RAG and grounding, post-training, call it what you will, there needs to be something in there, because it's not purely about the training, right? You know, I've shared on the list research that we've done that highlights misattribution, factually incorrect outputs in sort of news and current affairs reporting that have impacts that that can mislead people and sort of create sort of potential sort of reputational damage because of the misattribution and so on. So this work simply isn't complete until there is something that covers post-training type usage. And I don't recall exactly why the previous sort of proposals hadn't made progress here, but I'm happy to review them and perhaps happy to look with Nate and anybody else who's interested to see if we can come up with something.
Okay. So we'll try and capture that state on that wiki page and talk about it on the list. We've gotten to the point now where we've been doing this long enough and where enough people have come in and left that we need to keep records like that so that we don't spend all our time going in circles. And I appreciate that folks are very motivated to have this. I think we've heard that from a wide variety of folks. But at the end of the day, we need proposals that can gain consensus and address the issues that people have had about these things. So that's where we should focus our time. It doesn't do us a lot of good if people just tell us, yeah, I really need it, if we don't have a viable way forward for it. Nate, go ahead, and I think we'll move on after that.
Sorry, I didn't take my hand down.
Oh, okay, thanks. Okay, so that takes us to what two categories that are a little bit fuzzy. One is things about the overall model of what we're doing with the vocabulary. The hierarchical structure is problematic. There's some lingering text in the draft about hierarchy. I feel like until we nail down the other categories, maybe this is something we should punt on to see if we do need category when we have a better idea what the categories are. Any thoughts, Martin?
Yes. So the Paul and I discussed this one, and obviously if we don't have any hierarchy, that there's a lot of stuff that can be removed, but at this stage, it's difficult to sort of say that we're going to commit to a particular course on things when there are still open questions about, say, the top level category and what have you. So we're kind of leaving that stuff untouched for now. Understand that that's a bit awkward, but that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay, I think that's reasonable. Any other comment, or we'll move on? Okay. This is kind of one of the bigger, Ecker raised focusing on purpose rather than use. We've talked about this in a couple of different ways. It's also a long issue there. And this overlaps with 149. What was that again? That's Krishna's display-based preferences. Yes. I don't know that there's anything specific to talk about here, except to say that again, we need proposals and discussion. Obviously, we have Krishna's proposals. If other folks have proposals, that's great. And if people can talk about what issues they see with the proposals, that's great too, on the list or elsewhere. Again, to make that discussion in Toronto more productive. Any discussion now that can help us get to that goal? Okay. Defaults 154. So Ecker had the issue that he didn't like the unknown outcome. And he thought that if I'm interpreting correctly, I think he wants the system to be effectively self-contained, where you always get effectively a yes or no answer out of it, rather than an unknown, this tri-state possibly. And we noted that was related to 153, which is, yes, this difference between unknown and allowed. Any thoughts about these? I think we can consider these together. Do people agree with Ecker's concerns here, or is it reasonable to have this unknown outcome where we admit that the system is not self-contained and that it has to be evaluated in a greater context? Martin.
So I think from one perspective, Ecker's just trying to refactor the code in the sense that if you know what you might do in the absence of explicit signals, then you can run the algorithm in a particular way and it would turn it differently. I think this is, I'm struggling to sort of identify the concrete reason that you would change in this one. I think that's like what he's proposing is reasonable, but I'm not sure that there's value in that, because let's say that your response to unknown preferences is a third thing other than take the content or not take the content. Maybe it's take the content and use it in a limited fashion, or something along those lines. What he proposes would sort of foreclose on some of that possibility as well. So I think this is really about like the spelling of the code and not so much about the substance of the things that we're talking about here, which is like the definitions of the categories and what have you. So I would prefer that we sort of defer this and maybe come back to it once we have a better idea of the categories we have and structure and whatnot.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. That, I think, deals with these issues. And finally, and we seem to be using our time reasonably well, these are, again, an amorphous bucket of issues that have to do with the context within that the vocabulary operates within, whether that's legally or regarding conformance or what have you. Again, not the greatest category, but just a way to kind of bucket our issues. 192. Max raised this one. Clarity regarding relation to existing laws. And so there were, in discussion that we had so far, there are a couple of aspects to this, which is Max made a proposal about the terms of use, which a lot of people had issue with. But in reading what Max said, and if Max here, he can clarify, I think his main point was that we want to reinforce that kind of without prejudice to legal norms, whatever they be, whether it's terms of use or privacy law or accessibility or whatever, and reinforce that this framework is not cannot be used on its own. I think I saw Max here. Max, did you want to say anything else? Yes. Oh, there you are.
Hey, Mark. Yeah, listen, I think I'm sure people have seen the discussion on list. Obviously, this is something that there's a lot of discussion around. I think we should probably spend a significant amount of time at the April meeting talking about it, because I do think there's a lot to unpack here that in 15 minutes probably wouldn't happen. I think just very briefly to generalize the conversation that's been happening, and maybe erase a little bit of nuance. I think there's sort of two perspectives on this. One is that the work that we do here can be done in isolation without taking into account things that happen outside of it. And I think that that's somewhat naive. And I think that it's really important to be clear about what we can and can't achieve. And that's really what I'm trying to get at with this issue. Again, I know that is quite a generalization. And I think we need a lot of time to talk it through at the April meeting and get into the nuances of it.
Okay. Obviously, as Max said, we can't make a lot of progress here in the time we have, but if anybody has a suggestion or wants to volunteer to help move this issue along, Chris?
Just to plus one what Max has said, really, I do think that this is worthwhile discussing. I don't have a particular suggestion yet. There is a proposed text in the in the issue there, which kind of seems to point in a reasonable direction from my point of view.
Okay. Let's talk about this then in Montreal. 167, distinguishing access and use. Martin, I think you had made some progress on this and you said you were going to try and make some more.
Yeah, this is one of those things where I think we've not been very clear in our intent. I thought it was clear, but obviously when people raise concerns, it's worth having another look, and the fresh eyes are helpful. But it's always sort of been the intent, at least to my understanding, to distinguish for things like robots.txt, that there are two actions involved in any of these things as it relates to a given usage category. There's the robots.txt function sort of governs whether or not a crawler can crawl particular resources. And that means effectively getting the content from the server. And the AI preferences stuff has no bearing on that one way or another. If you say that someone can crawl particular resources, they can crawl those particular resources. The AI preferences only then apply to particular uses downstream of the acquisition of that stuff. And I'm using the word stuff rather than asset, advisedly. I thought we were clear, but I think we can probably sharpen things up a little bit.
Okay. So I think we'll leave this in the editor's hands for the time being. But again, one of the things that worries us about this group is that we seem to make progress or at least have good discussions when we get together synchronously, but there's periods of silence in between. So if people help weigh in on the issues or on the mailing list, that helps us move the work along. Even if you just say, I agree with this or I disagree with it, hopefully if you disagree with something, you say why and give some detail there. And ideally you make a suggestion as to a more fruitful direction, but we need to hear from people more asynchronously or this work is just going to be extremely difficult. Timid Robot.
Regarding downstream use, I don't have any recollection in the drafts about us kind of talking about whether or how the AI preferences travel with the stuff. And I would expect in some occasions that we wouldn't want to have an opinion, but it might be helpful to suggest, for instance, including robots.txt with this stuff, you know, as an example, that there's that the users of this stuff have to know what the preferences are. And we've so much of our discussion has revolved around the point of access and not the point of use. And we've just kind of assumed maybe that like robots.txt is going to travel with this stuff, but maybe that is too much of an assumption. Thank you.
Yeah, Martin says he'll open an issue to track that. That says thanks. So thanks for that. Lana.
Yeah, just to echo Tim's point about the complexity of this, like somehow having information about what the preferences are available to say like second or third like order users is, I think, going to be extremely challenging, especially in the case where the person that is setting the preference is not the owner, copyright or otherwise, of whatever it may be, and there might be conflicting preferences set. Like I can publish the same exact blog post on Substack, Medium, LinkedIn, but right, like all these different places, and there may be different preferences expressed, and so like understand how anybody could keep the records straight of like which exact place they got this from and what the preference was at the time, I think is one of the major reasons why I think robots.txt is a challenging attachment mechanism, which I've said a bazillion times, so I'm not gonna like hammer that again here, but this idea of kind of somehow tracking this downstream and the record keeping that would, you know, sort of be necessary for, let's say, a legal dispute that came up 5 years later about whether or not something was in somebody's model. I just think this is going to get really hairy, and so I thank you to Martin for adding an issue and tracking this, because I think this is, to the extent that we want these preferences to apply to somebody other than the web crawler at the point of access, or like an end user at the point of access. Like I think this is going to get really challenging as the asset or content like moves around the web.
Okay. Victoria, if you could be quick, because we have a couple more issues and we're almost out of time.
Yes, I will be very quick. I just want to echo what was just said, and also wanted to emphasize that the importance of clarity here is also kind of hard to overstate for users. It's more likely to chill downstream uses and much more creativity and innovation and other things I don't think we want to touch if we leave this ambiguous. You'll maybe worried about legal effects that may or may not actually be there.
Okay. Let's go back then.
Mark, Joe's on the line. Joe, make it quick as well.
Joe.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to call out what we did in the ARDC standards was we addressed it that it should be carried with the data collection for downstream users, but that, you know, in a sense, every data collector will have their own purpose. Some people will be repurposing the data for AI or other things, and some people might just be a researcher from a university, you know, collecting data, and maybe they don't need to maintain robots.txt, but it is in the best practices.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Real quick then, 3 more issues to get through. 164 3.1 conformance raised by Joe, asking for deletion of the entire section. Chris disagreed, and we haven't had any substantive discussion. So, Joe, did you want to speak very quickly to what your thinking is here? I saw you were in a public place. That might be difficult for you. Oh, Ecker.
In what way might an implementation be non-conformant to the specification? Given that doing everything in specification is entirely optional. And I don't mean like the normal way in which you can just not do the specification. I mean the specification as like, just like you're free to ignore everything in this material. In what way could you be non-conformant to specification?
At least like one thing I can think of, like, any unknown labels must be ignored is like certainly a thing that is mandatory to follow, right? So I think it's really about compliance rather than like anything more than that, right? Like it's not an enforcement thing. At least that's how like I'm thinking of this, and I don't know if you're thinking differently of it, Edgar.
Well, I mean, so I guess I sort of agree with you in the technical sense that if you say like, you know, I choke on unknown labels, then I guess I could be non-conformant. But like that seems like a very odd place to hang your hat, right? I mean, my point is that you could get a label, you get a thing that says no, 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 and you could ignore that entirely. You still be conform to the specification, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could say no, and you could like throw it in every AI model you've ever seen, and you'd still be conformant, I think. So if that's not true, so I'm just trying to understand like what it would mean to be non-conformant, like meaningfully.
So Ecker, I think the thinking, my interpretation is the thinking here is that if you say I'm conformant to that, what it means is I processed it in the, gathered and processed the preferences as per the specification, and the separate commitment that's being made as to what you do with the results of that process. So it's a question of, are you conformant to, did you go and actually check robot syntax? And now you're echoing. So it's separating the ideas of specification conformance and conformance to preferences. Ecker, you're still in queue. Did you have a response to that? And then if not, we'll move to Joe. No, Joe, go ahead.
Kind of reached me earlier, and I had a glitch going on. Is this the one on? I logged off for a minute. The conformance, the section that I felt was sort of getting into enforcement territory on whether you're conforming or we're on a different provision right now.
I think so. Yes. This is section 3.1 titled conformance.
Right.
And you say it states an implementation is conformant to the specifications if it correctly follows. This pertains to enforcement. So yeah.
Yeah. So that was my issue with it, was if there isn't an enforcement mechanism built in, it should be fairly obvious from what we're doing what you should do to conform. That's the purpose of having it, right? There doesn't need to be a separate piece unless it's for a future enforcement mechanism.
Right. So I think that aligns with my understanding is that it is enforcement is out of scope, and I think that's explicit in our charter. Paul.
I think there might be some misunderstanding on which layer this applies to. Like, I think this is about conformance of implementations in attachment mechanisms with the vocabulary, and not about conformance of a parsing of the algorithm. That will be more a compliance issue. Like, I think this is in the end conformance of attachment mechanisms to vocabulary, and I think as such it does make sense. It is not an enforcement issue.
Elaine.
Yeah, I found this aspect of conformance, not enforcement, which I agree is not an issue, they're not in scope here. But I found this confusing because traditionally, and I've worked relatively very little with IETF standards, but what I would be looking at is the musts and the must nots. And they're actually very few. Like, there are none in the categories or different versions of the categories that have been drafted, which I have found confusing as far as this question of conformance. That probably doesn't help get us anywhere, but when I think of conformance, that's what I look for.
Okay, thank you. So it seems like we might be able to address this issue by having some proposals for clarification of language around conformance. So let's see if we can get some of those and continue the discussion. We are at time now. Let's see, what do we have left? We've got 3.2 respecting preferences and 158 bots collect data for multiple purposes. If folks don't mind, we might just spend 1 minute on each of those. 3.2. This was from Alyssa. There's been a lot of other discussion of 3.2, and my sense is that people still want to refine 3.2 quite a bit in different directions. So I'd say if people have specific proposals or concerns about 3.2, let's get those recorded. But we can continue this discussion in Toronto and hopefully beforehand. And finally, 158, bots collect data for multiple purposes. This was another from Ecker. And I think this is kind of getting back to that sense of the collection time versus use time and what distinctions we make there. And I think that's going to be another topic. So if people have ways to meaningfully move that discussion forward before Toronto, whether that's proposals, proposed text, refinements on the nature of the issue that help.
I think this is probably, I think this text is probably now kind of okay as it is, I think. I'll take another look, but I think now that we moved the way we're talking about it, I think it's probably not a problem. I think, you know, the implication, I mean, there's an implication here, which is like, you have to like run separate models or something, but like, I'm not sure we have to say that specifically.
Okay. All right. That'd be appreciated if you could do that and get us to a place where we can make some progress here. That's it. We actually made it through all the issues we identified, which is great. Thank you everyone for the productive discussion. We have a meeting in the Shenzhen IETF main meeting. It's only 1 hour long. I think we'll do effectively a status update, much like we have now, and try to go through and summarize what progress has been made, if any. That's more of a meeting that incorporate the or advertises and incorporates feedback from the wider IETF community. So I don't know that we'll be making concrete progress there, but if you can dial into it, that would be great. And then, of course, we have the Toronto interim where we're looking to make more substantive progress. Suresh, anything to add?
No, I think it's good, and like looking forward to discussions before Toronto. Like Martin was saying earlier, you chime in the better, so we can try to do some progress and maybe even do an interim update in Shenzhen if we can in a couple of weeks. And Nate, like, thank you very much for offering to help. Please do engage in this. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.